Welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. My name is Bruce Gemmell. This is episode 63, Educational Institutions. Series of ruminations we do once a week on early Sunday morning. We do a preview on Wednesday. It just basically kind of like this is, been going on for a while. Started on another platform, wasn't happy with it, came over here, actually liked the way things have gone. Things are kind of like developing quite well. We're getting a bit of a following, which is nice to see. We have some people who are kind of interested in kind of following along and commenting, so it's nice to hear. But again, what I mean by ruminations here is the fact that rather than these being seen as presentations, what they are really is simply me and Julie kind of like expressing the ideas as they come and we work them through. In fact, one of the things that was always funny was I remember I gave a lecture and I asked for some paper prior to going on. And I said, "Oh, you're going to make notes?" I said, "Yeah." And I went on, and as I was going on to the podium, I was passing the I guess, I don't know, it was dean or somebody. And, he saw the fact that I had nothing written down, and he kind of had this kind of stern face. And then later when I was jotting stuff down, he says, like, those pages were empty. I saw it. It's like there's I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I work through my ideas as I speak about them. So really this is not a kind of like a considered presentation. It's more just a series of working through the ideas. And it's very valuable because for me, I do my best thinking, talking about it. So for me, it's been very valuable. Anyway, so educational institutions. I start with two things about the way in which we come across this idea of how is it that we come to better ourselves in terms of our circumstance. And I'm reminded of probably like one of my pieces that I've read probably the most and kind of loved the most is the short essay by Emerson called Self-Reliance. I remember right off the bat, before it even gets rolling, the first paragraph, the first lines catch my eye. And it one of the things that goes like this: in every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. Great works of art have no more affecting lesson for us than this. They teach us to abide by our spontaneous impressions with good-humored inflexibility than most when the whole cry of voices is on the other side. Else tomorrow, a stranger will say with masterly good sense precisely what we have thought and felt all the time, and we shall be forced to take with shame our own opinion from another. Now, Emerson believes that your position is that from which you work upon. So it's kind of like the consequence of individual point of view. So this idea that from a highly subjective point, things of universal consequence can be wrought. Totally makes sense. And I think that it really means that you till your own soil and you understand how to till your own soil, and that from which is of consequence can be possibly wrought. Now, again, I can't talk about education without talking about another one of my favorite essays, which is Aims of Education. Oops, so many bookmarks. And I mean, that's about as annotated as you can get. But again, I mean, I'm very hard on books, and Julie has started to do something I really, really appreciate. And it's odd, it's challenging, is she buys me fresh copies of my heavily annotated favorite books. And it's interesting because, like, I'm used to turning on my pages and seeing my pages with all my notes. But in fact, it's like, I'm like, wait a minute, where am I? I get lost and I have to read because my annotations basically help structure my understanding of the pieces. Anyway, since I was rereading this for the 1,000th time this week, something that I should have been able to comprehend and understand decades ago, right, kind of finally came to me. I understood the argument of this book, of this essay, But what was interesting is a couple weeks ago, I was talking about the adventurous mind. And in the adventurous mind, I came across the idea of, the critique of the consequence of adventure in this particular time. And it was very, very clear when I went back to read this that the process, continuum, and idea, the proposition was very much embodied in this piece, but I hadn't really seen it kind of as holistically expressed as I came to understand. Now, again, that's my fault. But the piece about adventure, in terms of the critique of the ontology, was really essential to kind of getting the point here. And much more of the process nature kind of came to me. Because again, the critique of both Plato and Aristotle, the idea of kind of like a static and a disconnected circumstance, was in fact that which is the most important aspect of the kind of the ontological reality that Whitehead has been able to kind of bestow upon us, much to our advantage. Anyway, I think that in time we will come to understand and appreciate this and be able to move into a kind of process-oriented era. A lot of times what happens is people kind of prefer nostalgically a time recently past or a time, long past. And what we've kind of seen is the fact that we don't ever totally leave behind everything. But in moving into a new epoch or a new era, there are certain things we understand have consequence that still resonate, and other things that need to be left behind. As that relates to the idea, we often hear people today lamenting as things fall apart about the idea of what is it that we should do, we should teach thinking. Perfectly true, perfectly realistic. But the problem is, based on what I've just explained, the nature and attitude of how thinking is constituted is what has to be established prior. So before we can kind of talk about, yes, we need to talk about thinking. We need to kind of, we need to teach people how to think. But before we can teach people how to think, there has to be that understanding of what is the consequence as relates to the attitude underneath thinking as it is to be. Partially, that's what we're going to talk about. But again, to talk about these beautiful things, it should not be too long for it to be easy, right? Okay, so choose some important applications of your theoretical subject and study them concurrently with the systematic theoretical exposition. Keep the theoretical exposition short and simple, but let it be strict and rigid so far as it goes. It should not be too long for it to be easily known with thoroughness and accuracy. The consequence of the plethora of half-digested theoretical knowledge are deplorable. Also, the theory should not be muddled up with the practice. The child should not be should have no doubt when it is proving and when it is utilizing. My point is that what is proved should be utilized, and that which is utilized should, so far as it is practicable, be proved. I am far from asserting that proof and utilization are the same thing, right? And again, can't leave this without my absolute favorite piece. Let me find it here. This has always been that which is the most important thing. And I think this is where, when we talk about thinking, this is the attitude that needs to at least be present now, as it leaves behind that static and disconnected thinking, right? I mean, so this is the thing, is to me the most clear, precise description of how education should be wrought and should be focused. Education is the acquisition of the art of the utilization of knowledge. Now, again, Whitehead says right here at the beginning, Culture is activity of thought and receptiveness to beauty and humane feeling. Scraps of information have nothing to do with it. A merely well informed man is the most useless bore on God's earth. What we should aim at producing is men who possess both culture, and that's activity of thought, and expert knowledge in some special direction. Activity of thought, right, is what drives culture. It's what drives intuition. It's what drives the adventurous mind. So we need to learn not how to think, right? We need to learn to understand the attitude by which we learn how to think. So, with that said, we come to the most important part of the program, as always, is what's new in Julie.
A lot, it turns out.
That's good. In fact, you have some good news coming from, what is it? From the world of TV, right?
Oh, yes.
And radio.
And
and
so on trip.
Was it,
The world of television.
And television, exactly.
Yeah. I just have to fit.
Okay. Bring in your little chair.
I'm
Now, you don't have a drawing to show us, right?
Yes, I have a finished drawing.
Oh, that's right. Good.
Really
Yeah, because I thought, okay, and because I was worried. I took your pad out.
No,
Right.
It's clipped here because it's really
Clipped.
Nothing else.
Yes. It could happen. It could happen.
I'm just trying to clip it without ripping it.
All right. Well, don't rip it because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites.
I didn't want to clip it. But there's nowhere else.
I know there's a way you can share the screen and show things, but I don't know. I don't know how to do it. It's probably under settings, but I don't want to mess with that. Okay. So, come P.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. We spoke briefly about this.
Yes.
And now it's completed as of yesterday.
Yes. So, yes, we've spoken about this.
Let's focus on the most menacing part.
Okay. Yes, I completed my drawing, which you all see here, yesterday night, and refined a few of the elements. It was basically done, but what this is sprouting or sleeping. This is actually my visualization of a lot of the information contained in a new science research article on plant science, is one of my favorite areas of independent research, which basically shows that a kinase gene is responsible for, it would be the equivalent of the human circadian sleep-wake cycle, which triggers a barley plant, actually all of the barley plants, to germinate way ahead of time, on time, at random intervals.
Intervals?
Yes, thank you. I'm really pretty tired. It's actually a very fluid process, and a lot of people think that the way plants flower, I could probably
get this down into you here. I just realized you need to get some of that tea into you.
There's nothing like a tea's tea.
I do, especially roses.
They should sponsor us. Anyway,
we could ask them. Who would we ask?
I don't know anyone at tea's tea.
Well, we can always call them and say, hey, you guys, we use your tea. It's always in our things.
Yeah. Anyway, so a lot of people think of plants as sedentary, as static, as rooted to the ground. They actually do a lot of chemical traveling. They communicate through underground fungal networks, through mycelium that actually link every species of plant above ground, underground. It's the giant, subterranean carbon rail network. It's vast, it's intelligent, it signals, it's highly sophisticated, and no one gives plants any credit. It's quite something. Anyway, in my drawing, what I have done is I have I've crafted a picnic, a Japanese cherry blossom viewing outing, but my picnic is a haunted kinase version of a picnic.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottle, can you hold this up? Or
Mm-hmm.
you?
1 second.
Okay, I will hold it up. So the sake bottle in my drawing here, which hopefully you can all see, uh, is right here, is actually a gourd shaped sake bottle, a squash or gourd shape. But what I have done is I have brought in numerous other elements and research and concepts into the fold. Right there is a squash bug, and there is a particular kind of an insect, literally called a squash bug, that lays its eggs on the squash plant leaves, on the stems, on the vines. Its larvae hatch. They spend most of their lives on the squash plant, and they short circuit the squash plants or the gourds sleep wake cycle. They short circuit their sprouting or their germination time frames. So in fact, I've brought entomology. If you can hold this up, P, that would
Mm-hmm.
really
Thank
be
you,
great.
P.
Yeah, it's hard to talk and hold this up at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. So right here you can see this very interesting shape. Yes, it is a geometric shape, a triangle, almost a perfect one. That is absolutely accurate to how the squash bug always seems to lay its eggs, which are a kind of splendid amber color that glow from deep within. Its larvae, which seem to perch on junctures which are geometrically a triangular shape, which are perched in the corners of the veins of the squash leaves in extremely recognizable geometric patterns. What I found fascinating is these mirror the patterns that are in fact on this lacquered sake bottle. It's a very large sake bottle meant for a group outing in Japan. It's from the Edo period, and it is in a case with this, which I have put into the background as a lurking haunted entity.
Mm-hmm.
You had a good way to
Yeah.
describe it.
Yeah, I think
Mhm.
what's interesting is the gourd shaped vessel, takes on this character of appearing and disappearing and kind of like having its different natures kind of have revealed in different circumstances. And then of course it being inhabited and kind of like having its interconnectedness. But what's interesting is that in all its activity, in all its motion, and in all its grandeur, there's this incredibly ominous and disturbing
Maybe you can
object
zoom
that's
in.
kind of
Yeah,
like
that's
lurking
good.
in the back, and it looks at this case unassuming, but at the same time incredibly overbearing and unnerving. And I love the fact that like it kind of just is kind of peeked in as if it's superimposed, almost as if it's an impression or an image that exists somewhere else, but now it's become incredibly close at hand and menacing. And it seems at the same time to be very unassuming, very simple. It's simply a desk. But
Oh,
again,
it's not. It's a picnic basket
oh, it's a picnic basket.
for
Oh, I
this.
oh I see.
It
Okay.
is a
Okay. Oh,
picnic
interesting.
set that holds
Ah.
stacked picnic
Oh,
boxes.
I know what it is
It
now.
is
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, I see.
thematically
But
very,
it's
very
okay. But
connected.
it's been emptied as the
Oh,
desk
oh
was.
yeah,
So
it's
it's kind
been
of like had this
unpacked.
exactly. It's
There's
exactly.
one
I
picnic
see that.
box
I see
left
that. Okay.
here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's been emptied. So what
Mm-hmm.
happens is it has this sense of kind of being bereft, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, the emptiness is part of the haunting quality.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. So I did find that piece very
Thank you.
disturbing. Very disturbing.
I think what also is a subtle undercurrent to
Mm.
your findings is I I very intentionally drew the sake bottle from the perspective of a viewer at the far left of the proscenium, and the half emptied picnic box set to the far right. So they do not match or mesh with each other metaphysically in terms of their point of view, meaning that as a viewer, you could not be at the far left and the far right at the same time. So I designed it to be intentionally producing a disorienting effect, which I think crafts a feeling of unnerving disquiet.
I think so, because the thing
Yeah.
is, you don't
But you
expect
don't
to see it,
really, yeah.
because it's also disorienting in terms of the perspective. You
Well,
kind of
yeah.
you're not sure
Oh.
how it is actually there or if it's there. But like I said on Wednesday,
Mhm.
what's also unsettling is it's very, very unquietingly close. It's at an incredibly vulnerable position relative to you, and
Mhm.
you're like, you're not really sure you've understood it yet and know it's safe, but
Mhm.
it's incredibly close and therefore menacing. Okay.
Thank you,
All right.
Connie.
Okay. So
Okay.
moving into this, we talked about the way I see this is as we move into different eras, into different epochs, we've moved through different pieces and we kind of keep coming up with names. We kind of keep coming up with, I mean, I understand, the fact that, there was in the beginning of the 20th century, a modern movement, and there were basically things related to that. And there have been various things that happened through the 20th century into the 21st century, different names, different periods, different priorities, and they exist throughout culture and politics and everything else. But I think what we're all kind of coming to understand is that which was the standard right now is somewhat nebulous. But at a certain point, just like we were reading in, Adventures of Ideas, we're starting to come to understand, okay, how do we understand or appreciate that which is to come? And what are the things we need to take with us? So how does the educational, institution fit into this? We know its tradition, we know its history, we know where it's been, we know what its problems are. But the point is, as it moves into this nest situation, given its present circumstances, what are the things that are necessarily in need of reform, or what are the opportunities that we see that could allow it to be the powerful mechanism it once was?
Or what are the opportunities we should be seeing but are not seeing?
Agreed.
I think so
I mean, I
too.
think one of the things that, like, one of the great things that the West has to point to is the institution of the university. The university, in fact, has become an engine that took us from the medieval period through up to today. And some of these institutions, still exist, like the first universities that we see in Northern Africa and the Mediterranean and in Spain and in other places. And the reality is, this is still something in the terms in which it's changed to where it is now. So what is it that we need? What is it that we see? What are the things that are concerning to us? What are the things that we see as potential? Okay, so
I'm grabbing my notes.
okay, go. Yeah, by all means. So one of the things that I think, going back to this idea of teaching thinking as opposed to basically teaching things, is the fact that the problem with that is, how is that, like I said, how is that to be actuated? What is the nature of thinking as we see it going forward? It's one thing to kind of say, think about things, but what Whitehead does in Aims of Education is lay that out. And in fact, it kind of comes through, and it's also embedded kind of like in the other pieces of his work, especially the later pieces, modern science and the modern science, Aims of Education. I mean, not Aims of Education, Adventures of Ideas and Process and Reality. So given these things, he pretty much lays out the fact that it was important to overcome these kind of ontological stumbling blocks in order to get to a process-based circumstance, so that you could understand not only the kind of changing nature of those important fundamental things, but also the interconnectedness of things, so that instead of seeing something as being, it's becoming, and it's perishing. So Start us with your notes, my loved one.
Yes, I have some
Oh my God,
extensive.
voluminous.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of time, but I've had these in my head
Hmm.
for a number of weeks, and I
Mm-hmm.
was starting a new drawing, which I didn't
Mm-hmm.
get very far on, but it was important that I
Mm-hmm.
got my
Mm-hmm.
ideas down.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to broach education and inventive learning amongst honeybees, slime molds, cephalopods, plants, and other non human individuals.
Nice.
And I'm calling them non human individuals because they are very much individuals. Most people very wrong-headedly perceive animals as swarms, as groups. They almost never look at them, except a pet dog or cat,
Hmm.
as an individual with preferences and tastes and specific friendships and specific skills, observations,
Hmm.
etc. But much less so when it comes to plants, and almost never when it comes to insects
It's
and
interesting. Yeah,
arthropods
because I think what's
or
interesting is what
bacteria.
we see in cats and dogs
Yeah.
is simply the projections of ourselves.
Yes.
So in fact, is like it's the
It's a
highly
mirror. I mean,
exactly it's the highly domesticated reflection of ourselves.
yes.
So the cats and dogs, basically, their personalities are enhanced by us. So it's not
Mhm.
as if we actually see the character of these animals.
Nope.
Yeah.
Shall I
Yes. Yes.
proceed?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so these ideas should be carried over and are not
Mhm.
into human educational models. And I think the overriding problem, my concern for the human university model, which was and still is an excellent model, is it's not being utilized in its full spectrum of applications. In fact, it has become a very narrow channel, and it has jettisoned many of the characteristics that made the early university model so indelible, so effective, and so eternal. What it is now is not what it should be.
True.
So I bring to you first, I'm going to focus on three animal models and this delightful tea, rose tea, rose, made of real rose petals,
Mhm.
which actually have antifungal, antibacterial, and antiviral properties.
Mhm. All the
So
way from Flushing.
that's funny.
That's funny.
Okay, so focusing first on honeybees or Apis mellifera, the title of a painting I did on this very topic. So the waggle dance for those, and I'm surprised how many people are really unfamiliar with it. I mean, it's been written about a lot, but most people don't realize what it is. That is a primary way that honeybees teach and educate and communicate information to other bees about new sources of food, new places for a hive, weather conditions, how far away, if there are dangers, transport, what the food sources are, what the quality of those are. It's an incredibly complex series. It's not just to be, shaking its thorax. It was misinterpreted for decades. And I will proceed from my very, very specific original notes. In foraging, visually guided decision making, the use of different sensory modalities to learn and educate, olfaction as education. I say this again, this is a key topic. Olfaction as education. And I will segue to my most important point here for you all tonight, which is that the five senses, the five human senses, have been all but removed from human education.
Hmm.
And that is a huge issue.
I hadn't thought about that.
Oh, I've thought about it quite a lot. And by that, I mean, and I will quantify this,
Hmm.
our senses are what make information resonant, relevant, indelible, memorable, and it's what allows us to educate ourselves, build on that, to imagine, to create, to write, to analyze, to observe, to read, study, and build, and paint and draw. All of this has been taken away. And the further we get to artificial intelligence, the more these things are stripped away. And we actually did touch on this in our program, for those of you who haven't seen it, on handwriting and
Hmm.
how
Oh yeah.
incredibly important that is to
Hmm.
learning and
Hmm.
education
Hmm.
and the retention of ideas.
Hmm.
So when animals learn, when animals educate, not just others, but themselves, this is really key. Self education has almost vanished off of the human front now.
Hmm.
And they use their sense of touch. Students don't touch much of anything now. They're on a computer, everything is virtual. They haven't touched a real book. And this is not a small problem.
Okay.
Yes.
We have to remember that the valuable intellectual development is self development.
Yes.
Right. And
Absolutely.
this is from the very first page of Aims of Education. Just
Yes.
as just as Emerson talks about the idea of it has to come basically from the individual's capacities, it is an actual self-created circumstance. And in fact, if one is to be process based, one has to be process based on the entity, and the entity is yourself. So it's interesting. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because the abstract ideas are the things that we teach in school. But the thing is, the abstract ideas are not really what allows us to kind of like actuate
Because
these
they are
things.
not sensory. They are not
No, exactly.
engaging
And then
any of
that's
the
actually
senses.
interesting because that's
Yeah.
how they become inert, and that's
Yeah.
how they become ballast, and they're just dead weight.
Yes.
Interesting, by not actually having a kind of force,
Any
yeah,
tactile,
yeah.
any olfactory,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
staring
the
at a
olfaction part
computer,
is
right?
very, very important.
Yes, also staring
Ultimately,
at
yeah.
a computer screen is
Hmm.
not visual sensory input.
Hmm.
And I stress
True.
this. Your visual sensory input is you as the individual who is learning in the educational environment. You are providing your own measures of transcription.
Hmm.
You are interpreting. But unfortunately, students now are not interpreting. The
Hmm.
computer, and especially artificial intelligence, is doing all the interpretation for them.
Mm.
No, this is really,
Interesting.
really
Mm,
key.
mm, mm,
So when honeybees tackle
mhm,
abstract conceptual thinking, they are tackling it completely differently.
mm,
They are weighing sameness versus difference. They
mm,
are weighing the weight of their own self actualization versus their presence in their greater environment, in the
mm,
hive, in
mm,
the outdoors,
mm,
compared to bees doing
mm,
other tasks and other
mm,
jobs.
mm.
Please.
No, it's interesting because like when we go back and we talk about Maeterlinck, and Maeterlinck talks about
Mm-hmm.
I have to go back and find this about the superiority of the honeybees in terms of being able to kind of make a calculation related to the hexagon for the cell to a greater accuracy than could be understood by the
Mm-hmm.
mathematicians in the early 20th century. And again, the mathematicians that existed in the early 20th century were quite formidable. And so this is quite interesting. So in this case,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that we could have organic analogies in terms of the way in which we teach takes us out of this absence of a tactile olfactory consequence. But as you want to think about it in terms of like, we talk about organic design thinking. organic design thinking is, in fact, understanding the fact that this alleged superiority of humans in terms of conceptualizing and abstracting is a fallacy. So that kind of like leads us towards these types of analogies, these types of mechanisms in order to create
Mm-hmm.
curriculum or
Mm-hmm.
process-based activity that allows us to kind of generate these kind of things within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that as having
Oh,
tremendous
I want you
potential.
to go to all the points. I
Yeah,
have a few more
yeah,
here,
yeah,
but I don't want
yeah.
to
But I
guide
mean,
it. So,
this goes back to something I was talking about.
oh,
Is like the
sure.
idea of
Mm-hmm.
the individual, and the
Mm-hmm.
individuality of ideas
Mm-hmm.
is that the circumstance by which you operate has to be a specific circumstance based on you. Objectivity, subjectivity are kind of problematic words, and they're also static circumstances. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have an overlap,
Mm-hmm.
rather than kind of seeing it as a kind of like organic spectrum, neither of which extreme exists. So I think this idea that, I was always taught when I was going to school that objectivity was valuable and subjectivity was useless. And, I had to come across more brilliant thinkers than the people I was unfortunately surrounded by to understand the ridiculous nature of that. But this kind of goes to a deeper level in the fact that
Mm-hmm.
not only should we not be looking for organic analogies, we should be striving for that. Because just like we kind of
Mm-hmm.
talked about previously, not only are these things valuable, they're better than the ones we're using.
Mm-hmm.
So
Would you like me to go through my last 4
yeah,
points? Because
yeah,
I
yeah.
want you to
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
time to
Yeah, I'll
go
get.
through
Oh,
your.
yeah. No, no problem.
Okay.
Just no.
Okay. So here are 4 really key points. The way that honeybees learn, the way they educate themselves and their colleagues and their young is highly flexible. So they utilize a neuronally fluid thought process. It is not at all sort of what how people thought an animal might think, which is purely by instinct, which isn't even giving animals credit for having actual rational thoughts and reasoning and analytical
Mm-hmm.
potentialities. The other thing, and these are really key, is symbolic learning and communication. And the bees use metaphor and analogy all the time. They are heavily steeped in symbolism, and the symbolism is meaningful
Mm-hmm.
and it is indelible.
That makes sense. I mean, again, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny. I've kind of talked about the Bronowski criticism of Chomsky's idea of language. And it comes back to the fact that, Chomsky's kind of somewhat anthropocentric idea
Mm.
was, to me, always problematic. And I kind of found it elitist. I found it kind of like stupid. Now,
It's
come
very
to
stupid.
understand, it's like it was incredibly short-sighted. So,
It's even more stupid than we thought it was.
yeah, but again, no, look, I mean, Chomsky's a brilliant man, and the work he did in linguistics is kind of like puts him
Yeah.
in the forefront of his. I mean, in fact, he brought it and made it a modern discipline, and he needs to be recognized and appreciated for that. But in fact, the same way we go back and we critique Freud, we critique, Einstein, we kind of
Oh,
understand the fact that there were limitations to the way in
yeah.
which he constructed these things. But I think in that regard, that was probably the most troubling oversight, right? Was and again, given the nature of the day, it's an oversight that was very common. So, you
Mm,
can't ultimately fault them. In fact, one of the things that
mm.
we always know is that, the things that stumble us are usually the first things we lay out, and that we may get other things right. We may
Okay, so
necessarily kind of have other things that kind of like get kind of like get, that kind of trouble us at the beginning. So anyway,
here are the last key points.
okay.
No,
Oh,
this
say
is
'em.
really important.
And I think one of the things that happens
Okay,
again
thank
is
you.
like, we talked about the way in which the educational institution has been at the forefront of helping us forge our way. That is no right. Presently, that's not the case.
Mm,
So the idea is like maybe as we forge this new beginning in this new epoch, we find a way to kind of not necessarily reform education, but hopefully find that education can find its way towards putting itself back where it kind of belongs, because no society has ever wrought itself to greatness and genius by being anti-intellectual. So the
No.
fact that we have a somewhat anti-intellectual environment, not
Very.
only in society, but also in academia, is incredibly troubling.
Very.
So, it's not like, saying things like we need to return to this. It's not a question of returning. We simply need to kind of forge ideas that allow us to kind of take the potential of learning and knowledge and education so it actually can be prominent and start to be able to create the individuals. One of the things we talked about this week is when certain centuries of genius take place, or certain kind of moments when certain golden ages exist. I believe there's a process by which this happens, and I think that a good example is we look at the early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century in physics, and see how within a very short period of time major advances take place, and then for a century, now a century and a quarter, little has really happened. So it's not, I don't believe the fault lies with the minds of the individuals. I believe that what happens is there might have been a circumstance by which these individuals had been educated in a kind of symbiotic way that they were capable of seeing the opportunities. So education was in step with the opportunities that laid before it. I think that there's a very possibility that the reason why we stumble and we're not entering a golden age is because we're not creating the circumstance that allows people to see those opportunities, and therefore we stumble. So that's a possibility. I'm just kind of throwing that out there. Yeah. So go ahead. Say.
Okay. Here is what is incredibly present in the honeybee and notably absent
Can we
in
talk
human.
about the slime?
I would love to.
I love the slime.
Didn't want to. I really do want to get into that, but I didn't want to. Over. So active transference is something that is not happening in human education, higher as well as middle school and junior high, meaning the ability of students or anyone learning anything to apply that knowledge across the disciplines to all the areas of their lives, to other things outside of that seat in that room. Almost nothing that people seem to learn, because they're not actually learning it, ever leaves the classroom or enters their mind and permeates anything else in their lives. But honeybees can apply organic intelligence and what is called native education. I say that again, native education, to complex artificial tasks in a laboratory setting. Do you have any idea how revolutionary that is? The idea that a honeybee will use its own organic intelligence, which it has in abundance, and native education, things that it knows intimately that are part of its life cycle, its daily routines, its foraging, the raising of its young, to artificial tasks that it has never encountered in a human laboratory setting. This is a transfer of learned rules across sensory modalities.
Okay.
Yes.
We've talked about perspective. We've talked about it in the classical sense of drawing. It's also talked about in terms of point of view, in terms of ideas. So based on what Julie said, can't believe you haven't read this, but maybe I've talked about it so much.
It's osmosis.
Yeah. Let the main ideas which are introduced into a child's education be few and important, and let them be thrown into every combination conceivable. The child could make them his own and should understand their application here and now in the circumstances of his actual life. From the very beginning of his education, the child should experience the joy of discovery, the discovery which he has to make in that general ideas give us an understanding of the stream of events which pours through his life, which is his life.
Well, that is
That's
precisely
exactly,
what I just
exactly.
said.
So
Yeah.
the thing is, again, this is the idea of what I would call an organic education,
Yeah.
which is, again, just the same way that we have an artificial architecture, we have
An
made
organic or native education.
yes,
Yeah.
we have an artificial education
Mhm.
in the fact that we've taken away, and you made it very clear.
Thank you.
We've taken away and simply gone to abstractions, and I think one of the things that always seemed interesting to me was that when I saw, images of bears or wolves or animals playing, right, it was this sense that they were rolling together, trying to understand the way in which to manipulate each other's bodies and learn the feel of certain things that would eventually become the way in which they would hunt and the way in which they would trap and they would prey and they would kill and so they could survive. So, in fact, animals very much taught themselves. Julie was talking about the waggle dance and the bees.
Mm-hmm.
They understood the nature by which they would entertain that education process as a
Wait till you
process.
hear about beavers.
I want to hear about the slime mold.
Oh yes.
So
As
in
soon
which
as you want me to say it.
we would see that. Now the ironic thing is
Yeah.
we have become so detached from an organic education that we hate, and we actually have to kind of deal with the incredible dissatisfaction of that which we most need to survive.
Okay.
So we've actually done education so bad, people are actually jeopardizing their own survival
Yes, they
because
are.
of
droves,
their hatred of what we're trying to
True.
do. So when you do something that essential, that poorly,
Yeah.
that people will risk their lives just to simply gnaw themselves free,
Yeah.
that is a testament to your failure.
That would be called education ugly.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm to take on coyote ugly.
Exactly. I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they will do anything to escape their own education, even at their own risk. And again,
do you want me to do this?
Part of anti-intellection that exists in certain cultures is because it is imposed without any potential for ever obtaining any consequence.
That's true.
Go.
Thank you. We're sadly running out of time. We might have to do a part 2.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. We do part 2 of everything.
Oh, okay.
Slime molds.
Very important.
Slime molds.
Yes.
Slime molds.
Slime mold education, cognition, and learning. This particular slime mold, which is a vivid lemon yellow, the one that has been studied most, the one I will be talking about.
As am I.
Thank you. I consider you a slime mold, which is a compliment. They're incredibly evolved and articulate and sophisticated. Is Physarum polycephalum, also known as P. polycephalum, hereafter known
Cecil.
as Cecil.
I just call it Cecil.
Okay, so
it's not Cecil. I just made that up.
Okay, Pete.
Yeah. I want to make no. People might say, "Oh yeah," and Cecil.
Okay.
I'm just joking.
I'm running out of time.
Sorry, Pete.
So slime molds exhibit what the scientists call brainless cognition. I don't love the term because they have a decentralized nervous system. They are not without brains or thought processes, quite the opposite. So they practice what is called decentralized reasoning and decision making by solving highly complex optimization, spatial conundrums that are actually very difficult for humans to actually solve and computers to actually solve, and solving multidimensional mysteries, my terminologies. They also solve highly complex, incredibly difficult and confounding architectural and engineering puzzles.
That's a piece I love.
Yes, and difficult navigational problems. So the original creation of highly efficient transportation networks like Tokyo's rail system. They actually have had numerous tests, and I've seen several Science View shows on NHK World on slime molds, specifically showing them. I saw this with with my own eyes. They solved the problem of how to link the many, many, many stops on Tokyo's complex rail and high speed rail system in the shortest, most efficient, energy efficient, spatially efficient way possible. And the rail system is based on what the slime molds did. And then they also put them to the test as if they thought this was anomalous. There's no way to fake that. I don't think that the slime molds had cliff notes or monarch notes or yellow notes.
That's funny.
Which is funny because they are yellow. They were given maps of subway systems from London to Paris. They solved all of them more efficiently than the humans. And here are some things that they found later on that knocked their socks off. The slime molds remembered everything. They anticipated future happenings. I actually know people who can't anticipate future happenings.
I can't.
See? I mean, it's like a thing. I can tell Bruce, a particular thing, and it's like I've never told him.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of that, most people cannot visualize their own present or their own futures. A slime mold can. They anticipate future unseen environmental traps, pitfalls, hazards, and optimize their future choices and decisions. I posit to you all, how many friends, colleagues, or God forbid, relatives do you all know who can actually anticipate unseen environmental pitfalls and hazards, optimize their future choices and decisions? I know of almost no people, but the slime molds do, and they do over and over. And here's something phenomenal. The slime molds educate other slime molds all the time. Shared learning, something that humans are very, very bad at. They transfer memory like a sensei to an acolyte. Trained, educated slime molds have been shown in laboratory settings to impart their knowledge and their experiences to novice or naive slime molds. So, yeah. So how about that?
That's amazing, because I think like what's interesting is that when you have, like we talked about the thing before with Maeterlinck.
No one finishes a rose tea better than
yes. So we see this. I like that. We see the fact that these circumstances are such that we know now that there are organisms that are better at understanding complex problems than we are. I mean, we talked about this with Maeterlinck with the honeybees. Now we're seeing it with the slime molds. Now again, slime molds practice on bigger networks. They're vast fungal networks that exist in all forests, which we're just now starting to discover just exactly how vast they are. So of course they're more capable. I mean,
they're because also ancient. They're very very old.
So the point is, like, they've been solving more complex problems by themselves before we even understood they were doing it and that we couldn't. So the reality is the organic learning systems, to understand these analogies is something that we not only should start paying attention to. We need to understand how far behind we are.
That's my point.
And it's like, we always say, as if we understand, we need to know the difference between how far we are behind nature. But we've always assumed that our brain, right, was the most sophisticated processing and kind of like and generative organ in the universe.
It's not.
That's
even
an incredibly
in the animal kingdom.
Well, it is to say we're not even in the top 10, right? So the thing is, just the same way that we established before that we're not in terms of architecture and engineering, we're maybe in the top 10. We might slip to the top 25, but we're in, but again,
not if you look at beavers.
Well, exactly. But I'm saying that's the whole idea is that, we assume because, and again, if we see something that's inefficient in nature, we consider it inconsequential or frivolous. In fact, no, it's just because we don't understand it. So with that said, I think we never really got to the kind of like the lamentable circumstance of the educational institution, but I think we've done better than that because we've kind of set the precedent for what was more important is if the educational system catches up, it certainly doesn't seem to be intuitively behind these ideas because it seems so incredibly scattered at this point, and it seems so kind of polluted with these kind of like inconsequential things and these inconsequential notions. So we really don't know. But I mean, I think we've kind of laid out for ourselves that which should be the priorities. And just like in the case of like in Emerson or Whitehead, we've laid out what some of these circumstances be. Let me just say if I find anything. And I think one of the things I think was also the case is that we saw, at least in the earlier 20th century, how the educational institution, especially in the United States, was that which moved society. It basically influenced society. And now we see the opposite, where it basically is just simply trying to follow up society and contribute whichever way it can. But the status of the academic has certainly been tarnished. We no longer, the academies, the institutions no longer lead the way. They basically try to be just technically proficient in following and, providing whatever they can. So we see, instead of the giant individual and the individual of ideas, we see the educational professional, the careerist classroom creator, rather than the giant of ideas. So the realm of ideas is no longer kind of championed within the institution. It's kind of fallen away. So I think the realm of ideas will always be there. It's just a question of we need to prioritize it. And if the institutions of education help or not, we'll have to see. Anyway, final thoughts.
Well, I haven't gotten to the beavers, but it's for part 2. What I will say is if someone were discussing a valedictorian, a human valedictorian of a top flight university, and they use terms like, a discerning person who maximized their resource gains, minimized their negatives, had sophisticated, problem solving, externalized spatial architectural memory, and repeated optimal, network solving, and the creation of highly original ideas, they would be thought of as a successful product of our educational system. Those words are used to describe slime molds, not humans.
Good.
That's the way I'd like to end it.
Next week, we will be talking about, let's see, emotional character 2. Perfect. All right. So the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's the benefit of all for us to keep it just that way.
Precisely.